Hello, I'm William Gallagher, and this is the 58 Keys Writing Workshop set of videos where you saw me hesitate there. So normally, I just gas on at you about something. You're a writer, I'm a writer. I tell you how I happen to write something, and then you please disagree with me in the comments. I mean, it has to be a conversation. Otherwise, what is the point? This week's slightly different. This week is part of a theme week. There are 3 58 Keys videos a week. On Mondays is this writing workshop. On Wednesdays is the original 58 Keys, which is explicitly for writers who work on Macs and iPhones and iPads. And then on Fridays there's the newer script writing one. All 3 this week are devoted to Jane Austen because, well, actually I'm stealing this idea. Katie Lumsden, who does a YouTube video series called Books and Things, every year she does, I think she does Jane Austen month, and she does it in this month of July, as this is first going out, because this is the anniversary of Jane Austen's death. Yeah, but this year, December is the 250th anniversary of Jane Austen's birth. So do you celebrate? Let's any excuse, celebrate now. A quarter of a millennium ago, and she's still right. I mean, she still writes. It reads as if she's modern. It does to me. Okay, quick story. I may have told you this before if you paid a lot of attention. I used to write for Radio Times magazine, UK equivalent of TV Guide, and as the title suggests, includes lots of radio. I was reviewing an audio version, BBC Radio 4 dramatisation of Pride and Prejudice, and it's kind of It's coming a bit off on the wrong foot because it's heavily narrated, and I hate narrators in writing unless they're unreliable. But listening along, I think it was on my iPod, it was that long ago, and the narrator says something so mod, like, oh, come on. Like that. A lot of the production was great, but that was going to be line 1, that it had just butchered Jane Austen's language. So I pop off, get my paperback of Pride and Prejudice, and there every word was exactly the same, lifted from Jane Austen. She sounds incredibly modern. She's affected me, and she's one of my favourites. So I would like, instead of the usual, this is how I see something, please disagree with me, I want to do a 5 things I learned from Jane Austen about writing. It's not like she sat down and taught me. And I say this to you, and there's a little bit of me that thinks she could be over there behind the camera going, no, he has that totally wrong. 5 things I think I've learned about writing from Jane Austen, okay? Starting with this one, which matters to me a lot. It doesn't matter what you write, you can't control how people receive your writing, what they think of it. And I don't mean in a quality sense. People like things or they don't, but what they think you've written, you can't control it just by writing something. And the example is people who don't like Jane Austen tend to have seen the TV versions and the film versions, and as good as they are, they haven't paid a lot of attention. All they've seen is, like, I think of it's Happy Bonnets, you know, all this, and constantly going on about this person marrying that person and the other. And I think at an incredibly surface, shallow way, you can take that quite easily as being frivolous. I don't want to knock Chicklet because I think Chicklet's good, but shall we say lightweight for women, and it's all romance and love and hearts and flowers and chocolates. Chocolate. Even those TV adaptations that I think present that, they only present it because that's the visual of the clothing that people wore at the time and the manner of speaking of people-ish who were at the time. They convey what Jane Austen, I think, does incredibly well, which is the misery, really. The absolute total dependence on marriage for women to survive. Because in this point, so she would have been writing... Pride and Prejudice were around early 1800s, and the class system and all the politics in England, women couldn't work unless you were a servant, in which case you worked to death. But if you weren't, you had no possible way of getting an income unless you became Jane Austen and wrote a book, or 3 or 4, however many got published in their lifetime. You couldn't work. And often things like, repeatedly in Jane Austen stuff, you're living in a house that has been entailed. I didn't even know what entailed meant to this. When your parents die, your father dies, the house belongs to another male in the family line, not to you. So getting married It's that or the poorhouse for it. It is a political commentary on the state of England at the time, and that in that sense it's fascinating. But what she does really well is convey the strength of the problem. So Happy Bonnets is not the situation, it's the problem for it, and she's really clear on that, even though to this day people misunderstand. And that's going to happen. The obvious example, how many times have people compared Jane Austen to Bruce Springsteen? Probably now. You heard it here first and last. Bruce Springsteen's Born in the USA could not be more of a howl of protest about America, and yet there's Ronald Reagan and others playing it as an anthemic pro-USA thing. I believe I read Springsteen saying, what can you do? You just got to play your song and move down the road and play it again, and people will get it or they won't. Okay, so number one, you can't control what people think of your writing. So yeah, forget it. Just get on with the writing. Okay. Second, actually this is related. Number two, I mentioned the film versions and the originals of Jane Austen's material. Jane Austen, I think, had an advantage that none of the writers who've tried to adapt her have successfully and sometimes brilliantly adapted her work. She doesn't have a problem that they do, which is, I think, exactly what I just told you, the situation in England at that time. She doesn't have to explain it because she's writing at that time for readers who are at that time, and they get it. They know this situation. I mean, especially if you're a woman, you recognise it at the time. Every writer since has had to explain it. And the funny thing is, I'm not sure you have to explain everything, because there's nothing in Jane Austen that says, at this time in England, it was impossible for women to work. You learn it, you get it. I mean, I think she obliquely refers to it. She obviously assumes you know it because everybody would, reading it at the time. So she explains less than other people do since, and yet it works. I think you get it. I think you get it because the characters in her book also know it, like everybody else around then did. You can over-explain in writing, and she doesn't. And she doesn't because she didn't need to, but I think she also doesn't do it brilliantly, if you see what I mean. She's brilliant at not explaining something that doesn't have to be explained. She's also a less tortuous writer than me. That could be another one. Number three, because this constantly comes up and amuses me, I think Jane Austen is really, really hot on anticipation. Now, I've mentioned Pride and Prejudice already, and it's not actually my favourite of her novels. Don't ask me which one is, because I kind of vacillate. Mansfield Park, Sense and Sensibility, but then Persuasion comes up. But for some reason, Pride and Prejudice seems to deliver the easiest examples of things. And in this case, there's a character called Mr. Collins, who's just a wonderful, horrible, oil slick of a man, absolutely foul and great with it. And she builds up the anticipation. She has him write a letter. So we have the letter read, announcing that he was coming to stay. And then a week later in the book, he comes to stay. And all the way from the letter to him coming through the door, you are waiting to see the man that wrote that type of letter for it. And he comes in and he delivers. He is everything loathsome in a human being, and it's fantastic to enjoy it. Yeah, she does this a lot. Anticipation builds up a character, then lets you see them, and usually they fulfill what you expect, and it's, well, normally funny. Okay, normally funny. I think Jane Austen is very good at the range here between funny and deeply serious, and I mean, she's superb at everything, isn't she? Her jokes are great, and she's vicious in her descriptions, but anticipation is a thing I don't see talked about much in her work, and yet to me it seems very clear and obvious. Now, I need to tell you, I keep a lot of notes here because I want to make certain that I got all the things that are in my head, like tumbling head. And at the moment, they're on an iPad that's just flashed up with low battery warning. So if I just tap that button and talk faster, you'll understand why. Okay. Technology actually puts me in mind of the fourth I said 5 things, there's actually 5 and a bit. The 4th thing that I believe I've learned from Jane Austen is that, you know, technology aside, changes aside, screen going dim aside, anything like that, people never change. She's writing about people in 1815, say, and you recognize them in 2025. She's just extraordinarily good at capturing a character in a few lines. I mean, occasionally I do wonder, because I think about this an awful lot, how would she describe me? I know she'd take about 2 sentences to do it. I know it would entirely encapsulate my complete character. It's just then with the 3rd sentence, would she destroy me or not? Because she does. It's very funny. It's very economical, which is really modern, I think. Just a few words to convey a character. I've said this before, so I may have written it somewhere before. Marjorie Allingham, writing in the early 1900s, had a line about a line. And she talked about how an artist can do one quick sort of sweeping curve on a face, like on the side of a cave. You can have and we get that is a tiger, I think she was saying. Jane Austen does that with a couple of sentences for it, and she's then also really, really good at consistently following through without being repetitive for it. Her characters don't vary a lot, because I feel like she's got them complete and we see them all. We then see different facets of them, but they don't move a lot. I mean, not true. I mean, you're thinking Mr. Darcy, aren't you? He goes through a definite arc, and I'm not saying her characters don't. How about we put it this way, as a writer, she is consistent in how well she conveys each character, even though those characters do, I'm sorry for saying it the wrong way around, do go through some quite progressive movement for it. Let's go to number 5 while I'm still literally scratching my head and the battery's lasting. Okay, number 5 is again to do with repetition, again to do with character description, but it's the jokes. Jane Austen, I think, is really, really good at getting every ounce of milk out of a joke. And she does it by having the same joke over and over throughout her novels. And it's always a joke about characters, which is why I think it works. Always a joke about their attitude to something. But she tells it every single time in a different way. She will have conveyed, let's see, isn't it Sir John, who's deeply into hunting. So ask him anything about anybody else, and their first thought is, fine shot. Got a great dog for hunting or something, and that's as far as his thinking can go. Or in, isn't it in Mansfield Park, one of the characters is obsessed with his lines in a play, that he has 2 and 40 lines to learn, and 2 and 40 lines just keeps coming back and back up. And I don't know why it's so funny, but it is. She is able to do all of this thing of setting up a joke and then finding every angle around it and using it to be funny, yes, but also to constantly illustrate the characters. Every time I read 2 and 40, I do love that construction. Every time I read 2 and 40, I had a sort of flash image of that character's face. Couldn't describe it, would never be able to pick an actor, but I saw him every time she said it. And then she will do something like, but Mr. Collins, this gloriously awful man. He gets married, and the fact that he gets married is very illustrative of the day and the desperation. The person who agrees to marry him, obviously nobody could possibly love or even like this guy, but she sees all the practical reasons that it's him or penury for it, and she goes for him. And Jane Austen has set up all of these characters, the lead in the book, but also now Mr. and Mrs. Collins, with this joke about how awful Collins is, until you get to the point where Mrs. Collins is able to describe how good it is that her husband is into gardening, and that she encourages him to be outside in the garden all the time. And we so get it because it's been set up for it. And you laugh, but you also recognize the truth of it and you feel for her in the future, but it's a laugh as well. And so that was number 5. And I said there were 5 things I believe I've learned. There is actually this other half thing. It's a half because it's a bit like the first one. Remember, the first thing I said was that you can't control what people think of your writing. It doesn't matter what you do, people will interpret it in some way. There's also this. Today, it's very common for literary fiction to be lauded and everything else, crime fiction or romance fiction particularly, to be kind of sneered down on. Back in Jane Austen's time, every novel was sneered at. Every novel was disparaged for it. And I love this. The only reason I know that is Jane Austen says so, and she mocks this attitude in a couple of books, particularly in Northanger Abbey, for it. You've got to write what you want to write. And I do mean in genre, but I don't want to end with this because I also mean down to every level of the story and things. It has to be what you want to write, not what anybody else tells you to. I'm going to have to put a link because I've forgotten the title. She wrote a thing called A Plan of a Novel, but the subtitle is as directed by suggestions for other people, and it's a scream. It's like 4 or 5 pages of a really bad novel, and it's just so funny in those pages for it. I'll put a link to that. There must be a copy online. I'll put a link to the description of it somewhere. I don't know. Anyway, but okay, beyond that, people taking suggestions, people telling you how to write things. People tell you not to write rom-coms, people not tell you not to write crime, people write serious stuff. And beyond that, they tell you, well, if you do write rom-coms and romance and things like that, well, then you must do this and you must do that. It's a famous example. Remember, this is early 1800s, mostly when Jane Austen was writing. She was writing before, but published early 1800s and around that time. The royal family in England, pretty serious stuff. At the time, it wasn't just for show. They had a bit of clout then. And I believe it was the Prince Regent. He was a fan of Jane Austen. So, good on him for that. But he basically told her what to write next. And Jane Austen said no. And in those days, King Charles said to me, I go, yeah, not doing that. She said no. I don't know the form she said it in. I don't know how polite. And I think she dedicated the next book to him. I don't know, maybe to soothe her or something. Who knows? But what I do know is in her letters around the time, the surviving, unfortunately few surviving letters she wrote, Jane Austen described this being told what to do. And it may sound like he'd directed her to do a kind of the Happy Bonnets version of her stories, and that she'd said no, and then she said this gorgeous line in the letters, which was, "Pictures of perfection, as you know, make me sick and wicked." That woman did not write Happy Bonnets. I'd like that phrase now, Happy Bonnets. We should use it. She wrote the way she wanted to write, and it was fantastic. All of those novels. As it's her 250th anniversary, I've been rereading her novels, and I thought I was rereading everything, but I realised there's actually quite a lot of material of hers that I've never read. There's a Juvenalia, things where she was incredibly young, and you can tell, but they are so funny. So funny. It's just great. And then the incomplete novels, things she started when she was very young and abandoned, and then unfortunately later didn't complete because she went and died at an incredibly young age for it. Reading everything, and it's an absolute treat. Plus it means I can read and vaguely pretend it's work, and yeah, all right, anything to put off writing sometimes. And then you read something like that and you think, I'll never be that good, but I'll try. Okay, so Jane Austen Week continues on 58 Keys. It's very easy to tell you that Friday's edition this week is about a screenplay. There are so many good Jane Austen adaptations, but there's a particular one by Emma Thompson called the Sense and Sensibility version she did. We're talking about that script on Friday. On Wednesday, with the regular 58 Keys, we'll obviously be talking about which Mac Jane Austen. She feels like more an iPad woman. See her with an Apple Pencil or something like that. What will I do on Wednesday? Think of something. In the meantime, the comments below. Normally I say please disagree with me, and if you do, well, good luck trying to change my mind about how great Jane Austen is, but, you know, have a go. Why not? You're a writer, I'm a writer. Let's go to it. Otherwise, I don't know what else I want you to say. How about you can infuse at me? How about you can tell me if there are things you believe you've learned from Jane Austen, and then I'll steal them from you. And so I'll have learned from her one step removed. Yeah, this is, you know, she was also brilliant at construction for it, and I'm floundering a bit today, trying to get it all in. She's kind of in my head a lot at the moment, and always is a little bit. How about we'll go off and write something, because we're writers. We should do that. That would be good. But we also read something, and along the way, if you can slip in a cup of tea and a comment below about how great Jane Austen is, off you pop. In the meantime, though, thank you for watching. It is important that we write more, okay? And I do feel that we're not doing as much as we should, both of us. We'll feel better if we write more, so let's go do that. But also, take care of yourself, eh? And I'll see you soon.